Hey everyone, recently I decided to finally play through a game that had been in my backlog for years, and that game is StarTropics for the original Nintendo. I had heard of a Zelda style game set on a tropical island and it always intrigued me, so I decided to turn on my NES Classic Edition, turn on StarTropics, and give it a go. I actually put a poll up on the community tab to see how many of you guys had played it before, and it looks like most people haven't. So, if you're one of the people who haven't played it before, then let's go over the highs and lows of the game and see where StarTropics should be in your backlog. I decided to give the game a try on the NES Classic Edition, mainly because I wanted to try it with NES controllers. I figured it would be a fun way to experience the game, and wow, was I wrong. Don't take it the wrong way. The system worked fine. The controllers were not an issue, and the game played great. It looked great, sounded great, and was extremely responsive. What I wasn't ready for was just how infuriatingly frustrating the game was going to be. I get some people might say that's just how it was back in the day. And while I understand, we now have the luxury of technology on our side. So after about an hour and a half of getting ragdolled in the game and barely making it to chapter 3, I decided to give up, turn it off, get my Switch, and play it through the Switch Online service. Why? The rewind feature. This became my best friend during my playthrough. I felt like I was constantly getting hit by enemies in more and more frustrating ways, and if I didn't use this feature, it would have taken me significantly longer to beat this game, assuming I didn't give up entirely, which was a real possibility. Now, I understand that this sounds like I'm just annoyed at the game, which definitely is not the case. So let's go over some of the things I enjoyed about it, and I'll elaborate on my struggles a little later on when I get to the gameplay. StarTropics takes place in a tropical location filled with islands and dungeons surrounded by ocean. I think visually the game looks great, as I think the color palette works quite well both in the overworld exploration areas as well as the dungeon crawling areas where the camera is zoomed in. I think this is an excellent decision by the developers as this gives the player a clear understanding of the objectives depending on the camera angle. Zoomed out, focus on exploration. Zoomed in, focus on combat. It's extremely simple, yet effective. The game also has some fantastic music. I thought it was extremely catchy, and the sound effects also worked quite well. Using the weapons, jumping, taking damage, it all sounded good. Everything except the death sound animations for bosses. The sounds were just too high pitched and screechy for my taste. I understand it's meant to convey the enemy is in pain and dying, but the sounds shouldn't make me want to mute the TV every time it happened. The game is an action adventure game, and if you're going to go on an adventure, then the story needs to be something intriguing to keep the player invested. And well, I found the story to be rather interesting. It did start to get a little out there as the game went on, but it still managed to keep me curious throughout. I'm not going to spoil the story, but I will say I was caught off guard by the direction they went. But still, overall, I think it was pretty good. The story was told through text boxes, with the majority of it being done through character dialogue. I think the text boxes were big and easy to read, and it was never an overwhelming amount to read at any one moment. I think it worked perfectly fine, and I have no issues with it. What I did have an issue with was some of the design choices when it came to the combat. Overall, I actually enjoyed the gameplay and combat, with my main weapon upgrading as the game goes on, other weapons or magic that can be used throughout the dungeons, and a jump mechanic that is used way more often than I thought it would. However, what I had an issue with was the enemies. Too many times I felt like the game was setting me up for failure. Sometimes I would walk into a new room, and before I could even take control of my character after the screen transition, there would be an enemy that started extremely close to me and already hurting me before I had any opportunity to do anything about it. Other times, enemies would have no set path, which is completely fine, but the ability to move diagonally, which I could not. So there would be no way to defend myself, especially if they also moved faster than me. And don't get me started when three diagonal enemies all turned to me and damaged me three times in a row before I could use my weapon even one time. Let alone the first time I was being hurt by an invisible enemy. And I don't mean an enemy that disappeared mid fight and I needed to avoid. I mean, I walked into an empty room and just started taking damage. There's basically no tutorial in the game either. Maybe the game's physical manual for the NES version had insight on what to do in certain situations, but playing the game through a virtual console, it wasn't really something I had access to. I would pick up a magic item earlier in the dungeon, but nothing explained to me that it reveals hidden enemies. I had to either figure it out by trial and error, or, on some occasions as the game went on, by an online guide. Because yes, I absolutely got to the point where I was so frustrated that I used a walkthrough in certain situations. I understand older games had a tendency to be more difficult and unforgiving, and kids would play the same 10-hour game for 4 months straight because they would die constantly and had nothing else to play. So if you feel you need the use of a walkthrough, don't hesitate to use one. The game just had a lack of communication to the player. Something as simple as collecting these stars that enemies would drop. For the first 2 or so hours, I had no idea what they did. Eventually, I figured out that every fifth star collected would heal me by one heart container, but nothing in the game told me that. If it did, I completely missed it. Another issue I had was some of the puzzles, and not so much the puzzles of what to do. Usually, that was actually fairly obvious. Step on a block and hit the switch to open up a door. What I did have a problem with was where to go. Way more often than I would like, especially towards the end of the game, hidden entrances and walls with the zero indication was the solution. Now, the game did start it off easy for the most part, hidden entrances with slight color variations, which usually is fine, but with my colorblind issues was still a little bit of a struggle for me. But I can understand that's not really a game design flaw with the limited color palette used in the NES games. Sections like this clearly show that there's something interesting along this wall. However, if the game is going to teach the player, look for inaccuracies along the walls, then I, as the player, am not going to walk into every wall to check if there's an opening unless I notice some sort of inaccuracy. But as the game goes along, hidden entrances with zero indication became the norm, and needing to check every wall for a random opening became extremely tedious. This is another reason why I think you should use a guide. It'll save you a ton of time because there's nothing that makes me lose interest in a game faster than needing to check every single wall in case I miss something, especially when it's necessary to move forward in the game. If you want to have hidden walls that I can miss and still progress the game, then fine, but not ones that are required as it brings the game to a screeching halt. The crazy thing is, this happens not only more than once, but not only in the combat areas. This happens in the exploration areas of the game too. Maybe I can't see it because of a colorblind issue, but as far as I can tell, there's no indication that this section of the mountain range can be entered. Now, I will say at least that they usually placed it in an area that it looks like a dead end and someone might go naturally check, but still, that's not always the case. I think it's such a shame that these hidden entrances really slowed the game down. At the end of the day, I think the game is pretty good with most aspects, especially when compared to a lot of other NES games that I've played that really don't hold up. The game looks good, has catchy music, an interesting story, and decent gameplay mechanics in terms of weapons. However, the game also has a lot of flaws that, in my opinion, are major issues that really overshadows the enjoyment. But the question is, where do I think StarTropics should be in your backlog? And well, because of the amount of frustrating aspects, I think it should be at the bottom of your backlog. If you're someone who regularly plays retro games and doesn't get frustrated easily, then maybe I can recommend it a bit more. But if you're someone who hasn't played a lot of older games, maybe the GameCube was your first console or something like that, and you're looking to start playing retro games now, then I wouldn't rush into this game. If you do decide to give it a shot, walkthroughs, save states, and the rewind feature on the Nintendo Switch Online service will be your lifelines because they absolutely were for me. I got so frustrated that I don't think I ever played the game more than 45 minutes in a row without switching to something else just to keep myself from getting too annoyed. And I beat the game in roughly 6 hours of gameplay, but without the walkthroughs and rewind, it probably would have taken me over 10. And there we have it, where I think StarTropics should be in your backlog. Let me know down below if you plan on giving the game a try, or if you have already, do you think I was a bit too harsh on it? If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit the thumbs up. It really helps out a lot, and be sure to subscribe for more video game related content. If you want to see where DuckTales Remastered should be in your backlog, then be sure to click right here.